You know, back in the golden age of flight, there was one aircraft that was just different. It was an icon of pure adventure, incredible luxury, and just raw, unfiltered ambition. It promised to shrink the entire world, and in doing so, it became an absolute legend. So let's talk about the incredible story of the China Clipper.
Okay, I want you to picture something. It's the 1930s. We figured out how to fly planes across the Atlantic, sure. But the Pacific? Whoa, that was a whole different beast. It's this massive, untamed stretch of water. The idea of connecting America and Asia by air, it honestly sounded more like science fiction than a real plan. So the question was, how on earth do you make the impossible possible? Well, the answer came from a company with a seriously audacious vision, Pan American Airways. They had this dream of creating an aerial bridge, a highway in the sky, right across the Pacific. But to do it, they needed a technological leap that nobody had ever seen before. It was a massive gamble, but one that could literally redefine how people traveled the globe. So what was the secret sauce? The key to this entire crazy dream? It all came down to one brilliant piece of technology: the flying boat. I mean, think about it. You can't exactly build massive runways on these tiny remote islands in the middle of nowhere. But with a flying boat, the ocean itself becomes your runway. It was this elegant, perfect solution that made everything else possible. So, Pan Am went to the Glenn L. Martin Company and basically said, "Build us our dream." And boy, did they deliver. The result was the Martin M130, and this thing was an absolute giant of the skies. And the very first one they delivered, it was given a name that would go down in history, the China Clipper. But here's the thing, this wasn't just some clunky workhorse plane, oh no. For the very few, very wealthy people who could actually afford a ticket, this was basically a luxury hotel with wings. We're talking dining rooms, sleeping berths, a level of service that was completely and utterly revolutionary for the time. And the specs on this machine, I mean, for the 1930s, they are just mind-blowing. A wingspan of 130 feet, a range that could cross these huge stretches of open ocean, and look at that cost. Over $400,000 back in 1935. That's an astronomical sum. This wasn't just a plane, it was a statement, a true marvel of engineering. And the price of admission to this flying hotel? Brace yourself. A single round-trip ticket to Honolulu cost $1,700. To put that in perspective, a brand new Plymouth car cost about $600. So you could buy almost 3 new cars for the price of one plane ticket. This was travel for movie stars and millionaires. This was the jet-set lifestyle, decades before jets were even a thing. And all of this, it all came down to one single day, November 22nd, 1935. Over in Alameda, California, a crowd of more than 100,000 people gathered. Can you imagine that? They were all there to witness history, to see if the China Clipper could actually pull off a flight that so many people still believed was absolutely impossible. Now, what's really interesting is that this first flight didn't have any paying passengers. Nope. Its mission was all about proving the route was safe by carrying mail. And the public went crazy for it. The plane was loaded with over 110,000 letters, sent by collectors and regular folks who were just desperate to own a tiny piece of this historic moment. The route itself was this epic, week-long journey. The Clipper basically island-hopped across the vast ocean using this chain of small bases Pan Am had painstakingly built on remote little islands. It went from Honolulu to Midway, then Wake Island, then Guam, before finally arriving in Manila. And the impact was just staggering. A journey that took the fastest steamships more than 2 weeks was suddenly cut down to just under 60 hours of total flying time. In a single flight, the Pacific had been tamed. The world had just gotten a whole lot smaller. And you can't talk about this flight without talking about the crew. These guys were absolute legends. The commander was Captain Edwin Musick, Pan Am's chief pilot. But his navigator? Well, this is where the story gets really interesting. It was a man named Fred Noonan. And if that name sounds familiar, it should. Just 2 years later, he was the navigator who would tragically disappear over this very same ocean alongside Amelia Earhart. For nearly a decade, the China Clipper was the undisputed queen of the Pacific skies. Her celebrated career continued right into World War II, but it wouldn't have a celebrated ending. No, this story ends in tragedy. So after that glamorous debut in '35, the Clipper was pressed into military service during the war. It was painted a drab olive green, and its crews gave it a nickname, Sweet 16. Its long and storied service came to a very abrupt end on a stormy night in January of 1945. The end came during a landing in Trinidad. The official report from the Civil Aeronautics Board basically concluded it was pilot error. The first officer, who didn't have a ton of experience in the M130, seems to have misjudged his altitude and just flew the plane right into the water at high speed. It was a disaster. 23 of the 30 people on board were killed. But here's the thing. A crash could destroy the aircraft, but it couldn't destroy the idea of the China Clipper. The physical plane was gone, sure, but its legend was only just beginning to take flight. It became a pop culture icon almost immediately. The US and the Philippines both issued special airmail stamps. A year after its first flight, Hollywood made a movie called China Clipper, starring Humphrey Bogart of all people. Decades later, it even got this quirky little shout-out in a song by the Monkees. And in what has to be the most perfect tribute, on the 50th anniversary of that historic flight, back in 1985, Pan Am brought the name back. They christened a brand new Boeing 747 the China Clipper 2 and had it retrace that original groundbreaking route right across the Pacific. A total full circle moment. The China Clipper was so much more than a machine. It was a symbol of how technology can shrink our planet and at the same time expand our dreams. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What's the modern marvel of our time? Whether it's a global satellite network or some new kind of AI that people will still be telling stories about 80 years from now.